There are two basic motivating forces, fear and love. When we are afraid, we pull back from life. When we are in love, we open up to all that life has to offer with passion, excitement, and acceptance. We need to learn to love ourselves first in all our glory and our imperfections. If we cannot love ourselves, we cannot fully open to our ability to love others or to our potential to create. Evolution, all hopes for a better world, rest in the fearlessness and open-hearted vision of people who embrace life. And this week's opening quote comes from John Lennon. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maxwell Egan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I will be your host for the next hour. You know, everything about this system is designed to make you pull back from life. Exactly as John Lennon said in that quote. You know, we live in a system that has its foundation in fear-based mind control, and it is this fear that causes people to pull back from life all the time. And great things have been achieved by those who embrace life. Indeed, all of the great things that have been achieved in history have been achieved by those who embrace life. And everything about this system is designed to prevent us doing that. I mean, sure, we're given certain pleasures we can pursue, certain enjoyment zones we can go and participate in, and all that sort of stuff. We're given things to do, but is that really what it's all about? Is that really how you participate in life? Because life isn't really about working and then going to the designated enjoyment zones. Life is about excelling. Life is about experiencing the art of being you. But everything about this system detracts us from that path. You know, even the spiritual paths that we get led down are usually circular paths that lead us into a little blind alley and keep us locked in there in a state of inaction. And it's the same with most of the things that we're given, which appear to be beneficial to us on the surface. They're presented in that way, but when we really look a little deeper, they're not beneficial at all. And if you look even deeper than that, you find that most of them are designed to channel you in a certain direction, down a certain pathway, and give you concepts which simply serve to homogenize your thinking and lead you away from the true essence of yourself. Look at recent changes that have been made to the education system. This has been done under the guise of making it fair for all the children. You know, they'll give people reward cards for simply participating in an event, but they won't give any awards to the higher achievers because they don't want the underachievers to feel bad. So essentially they're not rewarding high achievers, they're not rewarding intelligence. And what this does is it prevents people from excelling. It makes people believe that everybody is of equal brain capacity or equal ability to everybody else, and this simply isn't true. This prevents people from ever feeling that they can excel. It prevents people from leaving school becoming entrepreneurs, and it basically homogenizes society so that there are no high achievers because there are no underachievers. And this effectively makes everybody uniform in the eyes of the system, but as I said, it also prevents people from ever being able to excel and remove themselves from the control mechanisms of the system. And there's something that I've said many times before, is that what we're actually facing here is a spiritual battle. And this can be applied to the emotional response to the system and also the legal response to the system. And even when we look at ways out of the system, and I'm not talking about legal ways out of the system or freeman ways out of the system, but more emotional ways, spiritual endeavors, more ways of internally removing ourselves from the system. Many of the things that are offered to us, such as the New Age movement, many spiritual pathways that people pursue. These sorts of pathways are very often designed to steer you away from any real participation in life as well. And that may seem like a strange thing to many people, but it's true. You know, if you spend your life sitting there in hours of solitary meditation, you're kind of missing out on the world that you live in and the people around you who all came here to share the experience with you. And really, it's about the experience. You know, if you really want loneliness and sitting there in a meditative state, well, I assure you, you're going to get a lot of that after death. You know, we spend a lot of time during life wanting to find the oneness that we believe exists. But really, when you have experienced that true oneness in meditation or in ceremony, it's actually a very lonely place to be. It's actually profoundly lonely. And you're going to get plenty of that after this experience is over. So make sure you don't miss out on the path and miss out on the journey that you're on and miss out on the experience and the joy of duality the joy of actually having someone to have a conversation with. It's a pretty good thing. We've been given this concept of what duality is and how we need to step away from duality. And sure, when duality separates us and makes us fight and argue with each other, it's a bad thing. But duality in itself is how experience happens. Without duality, you can't have any experience because you're simply at one with the entire universe. You are all-knowing, all-powerful, all-omnipotent. Where is there to go from there? Who is there to talk to? What is there to do with all of that information? Could that be why we come here? Why we come here to experience this grand duality amnesiac experiment? Because it's really the only way to have what we would call experience. It's the only way to have any real experience at all. And without the amnesia that goes along with it, well, how would you have anything new ever happen? You'd already know the outcome of everything. You'd already know every experience, every sensation. So you need to come into this reality with a completely fresh slate, not knowing anything, in order to make the experience even worth having. Indeed, to even have an experience. I mean, just imagine, folks, if you came here knowing everything about everything, then what would there be left to experience? It wouldn't be experience, it'd just be a repetition of everything you've already experienced. And everything, no matter how fantastic it is, it doesn't matter how much you love it, if you do it enough, eventually it's going to get old. But think of something that you really love to do and remember the joy that you got the first time you did that, and the joy that you received the many times you did it after that. But if this went on for 10,000 years or 1,000,000 years, I mean, how much joy would you get from it? And so you have to live the life in a state of amnesia, or else there is nothing to experience. One of the greatest things to know about life is that it's about the experience. It's about the journey. It's not about collecting stuff. It's not about material wealth. We often think it is. We think that this quest for wealth and this quest for intellectual knowledge or this quest for whatever is experiencing life, but it isn't. Life is about sensation. It's about taste. It's about smell. It's about sight. It's about feeling things. It's about touch. It's about eating food. It's about feeling emotions, learning what these emotions are for and how to use these emotions, and feeling love for another person, experiencing the trees, the birds, the butterflies, the ocean, all of the incredible things that are here to experience, that only exist in physicality. And it has nothing to do with the accumulation of wealth. It's about the journey. We go down this pathway of this quest for knowledge or this quest for wealth, but what you find is that the more of it that you get, the less satisfied you become. It's an interesting thing, if you gave everybody in the world $10 million, or $100 million, or $1 billion, or whatever, just give them unlimited wealth. Probably within a week or two, or a month or two, certainly within a year, they'd all be bored silly. They wouldn't know what to do with themselves if they were able to do everything. They wouldn't know what to do with themselves because none of the things that they really do in life are real pursuits. Like if we get $10 million, what are we going to do? They're going to go and spend it on traveling the world and going to all these places which have all been homogenized to be the same as everywhere else. Or what are we going to do? Buy fancy clothes or a fancy car or a big house or whatever. We buy all this stuff, we get all these things, but it doesn't really mean anything because it's not really about that. We think that if we reach these goals, it's actually going to mean something, but it doesn't. It's just a distraction from who we are. It's the same as a lot of the intellectual pursuits that we indulge ourselves in as well. I mean, the more knowledge we get, the less we know, because as you accumulate more and more knowledge, you begin to realize that it's mostly other people's opinions, and you don't really know the validity of most of it anyway. You don't really know how reputable most of these sources are. We might say, well, look, they come from very reputable books by reputable authors, but how do you know? How do you know they're actually reputable? Did you write the reviews on them? Did you know them? Do we even know these books are as old as what we're being told that they are? I begin to question everything because, ultimately all that we know is that which exists within living memory. All the rest of it is simply stuff that we've been told. So it becomes very, very difficult to actually figure out the real story of where we are, where we came from, and who we are, what time it is, what year it is, what date it is, what history really is all about at all. And that's the result that I've come to anyway, after 40 or 50 years of digging down these rabbit holes and attempting to discover the truth, what I've discovered is that the only real truth I ever knew and will ever know is myself. You know, even with the history book that I wrote back in 2005, Earth's Forbidden Secrets, when I was looking at that book, or when I was looking at the information to write the book, I was assuming that the timeline we're given is correct. I was assuming that time has progressed in the way they say it has progressed. I mean, sure, there may be certain problems with history, such as when you look at the pyramids, they claim they were built 4,500 years ago, but all evidence would suggest that they were actually built around 10,500 years ago. But that again is using the timeline we are given as a reference point. And admittedly, all I was really attempting to do with that book was point out the fact that everything we're told about history is wrong. I mean, history is completely different to what we're told it is, even given the timeline that they give us. Even if the timeline they give us is correct, history is still completely different to what we're told it is. Because we've got all these monuments and all these things lying all over the planet which tell a completely different story to the one that we've been told. So that was the main point of the book. But like I'm saying, even in looking at that, I was still using their timeline as a reference point because I was assuming that that timeline was correct. But what if that reference point is completely wrong? What if that timeline is not correct at all? An interesting thing that I've come across recently is a mudslide that happened in Europe sometime within the last 400 or 500 years. I mean, and I'm talking a mud flood, not just a mudslide, a mud flood that seems to have gone right across the entirety of Europe because they're finding buildings in Russia. Like there was one building, they went in there and they started digging a foundation to put in a new building, and as they were digging down they found that the buildings next door actually had another floor below ground level that nobody knew was there. And they just covered it all up, moved the front entrance to the building up to the second floor and allowed it all to stay that way. And there's a whole layer of mud that has gone right through this town around about 12 feet high, which has virtually buried an entire level of the town. And they've also found this to be the case in Italy, which is way down in the south of Europe, the south of the European continent. So this is in Russia and it's also in Italy, so where else is it? And I'm finding buildings in Holland that have got strange dates on them. They have a J there instead of a 1. For example, a town that was built in the 1600s, the date on one of the buildings may be J646, which gives the impression of 1646, only it has a J there instead of a 1, which is a very interesting thing. Which makes me wonder whether that is possibly a Jesuit reference or a reference to the Julian date, the Julian calendar, or is that simply the way they wrote ones back then, or what's going on? But these buildings that we're seeing that have a complete floor buried below the surface were built around about the 15 or 1600s. So if this mud flood went across the European continent, it's happened very, very recently, like within the last 400 or 500 years. So what do we know about that? And of course, even thinking about that, it brings all of our history into question. It brings the Renaissance into question. It brings the medieval history into question. It brings ancient history into question. It brings everything into question. Because if we don't know this, then what do we know? And what is true about what happened in history? Indeed, how old is our history? How old is the history of this place? Because there's a very real possibility that as recently as 500 or 600 years ago, we were living in a very, very different world. Of course, you wouldn't think that because we can look at our history books, and our history books show a gradual linear progression through civilization into technology and where we are now. And we tend to believe this because it's written in books, you know, the magic spell of the written word, the way it has this effect over us. But the problem is that when you actually go out and travel the world and look around the place, you find all these artifacts lying all over the planet which tell a completely different story to what we're told in the history books. So what's the truth? Personally, I think the truth is that the human race has done some pretty remarkable things in the past, and all of this information has been obscured from view. A lot of what we are capable of has been hidden from us, and those who have manoeuvred themselves into a position of power now are seeking to ensure that they always stay there, and that no one else rises above the mud from this point. They're really attempting to limit human potential, limit human thought, and as I said, limit the possibility of entrepreneurship, of people simply excelling by their own means because of their own intelligence and due to their own creative potential. You know, realizing that potential, being comfortable with it, and being able to excel in it. All of the things about society which were put there to help people are being removed, and everybody is being constrained by legalities in what they can do and even in what they can think about. The social justice warriors are certainly making sure of that and going all out to homogenise the general thinking of society. And social media and smartphones and everything that is being done to make us all the same. When we're not all the same, folks. We all have equal value, certainly. We all have equal right to be here, but not all people have equal potential, because not all people think the same way. And not all people are possessed of the same degree of intelligence as other people. Certainly not all people are possessed of the same artistic or creative potential as other people. We've seen some incredibly creative people excel over the centuries. Imagine what it would be like for someone like Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci to be born into the modern world. Imagine how much they would be squashed. They would either be exploited and sent to a special school where they could be exploited and trained to think in a certain way, or they would be told that they are not to think themselves any more capable of anybody else and to just put all these ideas they had aside and to be a good little cog in the big machine. And the same would be for people such as Nikola Tesla, Victor Schauberger, Royal Raymond Rife, or even any of the mainstream scientists or academics that you may like or respect or whatever, Newton or whatever. None of these people would have ever been able to excel and to present their ideas to the world within the confines of the modern social and educational system. None of the great innovators in history would ever have been able to gain a foothold within the current system. And I truly feel incredibly sorry for kids that are growing up through the current education system, that are forced to comply to the whim of the current education system. Because this system is designed to limit human potential and to never allow people to excel unless it's by government-approved methods. In fact, within the confines of modern education and academic systems, anyone who does feel creative or artistic will likely be offered the opportunity to change genders, because there's simply no room for artistic and creative people, and it serves no purpose to think for yourself in the modern world. So why not change genders and become something that you're not? That's literally how bad things have become. I'm not sure how many people saw the news report about a gender transition that has been undertaken for a 4-year-old in Australia, ladies and gentlemen. That's how ridiculous it's become. Talk about destroying someone's life before they have the ability to think clearly or think for themselves or even know what gender they really are. Well, what's happening in Australia is a fine example, and this is child abuse, basically government-sanctioned child abuse being promoted by a government-controlled media and the demented mouthpieces that the media puts up there to just push this onto the people. And it's absolutely incredible that they do it, and people just allow them to do it. Australia is going really, really backwards in this respect. It really is leading the way in government-sanctioned child abuse and stupidity and gender transition and the homogenization of not only people's minds, but also of people's sexuality. It's really disgraceful to see. But the most amazing part about it is that people simply aren't standing up and doing anything about it. But that's just the way of this system, folks. That's what the system is designed to do. It's designed to destroy people. It's designed to shape humanity or reshape humanity into what the government wants it to be. And what they want people to be are good little drones who just do what they're told and just think the way they're trained to think. And one of the most important things that this system and this social system and the education system does is to knock you on the head if you think you're a little bit special, and to assure you that you're not, and that you really shouldn't think you can become anything at all unless it is one of the designated routes to the designated type of government-approved success they think you should have. They just don't want anyone to have any new ideas that might change the balance of power or change the structure of the general social ecosystem. They're quite happy for you to have ideas as long as they can co-opt these ideas and use them as part of the control grid, but they don't want anyone thinking up anything new, because they might just lose control of things if people were to do that. And that's the general plan. The kakistocracy who run the world now want to keep running the world, and they don't want anyone to be able to shift them out of power. And it never used to be like that, folks. We used to employ politicians and they get up there and do things for a little while, and then we'd employ someone else to do it. It was never a career path. It was never a career choice. It was just something that you did for a little while, then you went back to living in the suburbs like everybody else. But over the last few generations, politicians have given themselves perks and lurks, and they've changed the system, and now it has become a career path for the ultra-corrupt. And that is a very unfortunate reality, and it's a situation we have to deal with, ladies and gentlemen. It really is. No matter how uncomfortable it is to admit it, it's a reality, and it's a situation that needs to be rectified. And the problem is, like I said, the politicians are going all out to reduce human potential and to make sure that no one is able to climb to the top of the pile. They're doing this by reducing people's ability to be able to think properly, their ability to really be able to understand their environment. I mentioned earlier how they are removing awards from schools so that there's nobody able to excel, everybody becomes homogenized. But they're also doing things to our biology which is quite dangerous as well. Like, not only are they messing with us genetically through the food and the vaccines and biologically altering us that way, making it very difficult for people to have babies so they can bring in their artificial sperm and their ectogenesis chambers and all this sort of stuff. Not only are they doing that, but they are also doing far more insidious things, such as removing our ability to hear properly or to see properly. And they do this by limiting the light spectrum and limiting the sound spectrum that we're exposed to. It's like if you sit in a chair for the next 20 years and you don't actually get up and walk around, your legs will become atrophied because you simply didn't use them. And it's the same with your hearing and your sight. If you don't use it, then it becomes atrophied. What they've done with MP3s, for example, is they've removed certain frequencies from the music because, well, we figured you don't really need to hear those frequencies. And they've done it under the guise of reducing the file size for you, of course. But what they've done is they've removed a lot of the spectrum of music, a lot of the spectrum of sounds that you're normally used to hearing. So if you listen to MP3s on headphones all the time and your ears become used to only hearing that particular spectrum of sound, then your ears become atrophied and they don't hear the other spectrums. Eventually there's just no need for them to actually listen to those areas. Subconsciously, this is how it works. It's the same with LED lighting. LED lighting is a very, very bland form of lighting. It's very unnatural and does not cover the full spectrum range of light frequencies that one normally sees in daylight. This, again, in turn, limits people's vision. It limits their ability to be able to take in these other spectrums and slowly blinds them. And they're doing this again with the spraying. This is one of the things, the byproducts of the chemical spraying that goes on in the sky. And for people who think that they're not spraying in the sky, please go and wake yourself up somewhere, splash some water in your face or something. I'm so sick of people coming and saying, oh, chemtrails are a myth, they're not spraying. I mean, look up in the air, they are spraying, and they've been doing it for a couple of decades now. The skies didn't look like this when I was a child. It's very simple. They are spraying the skies. And this is a multi-platform delivery system. There's all sorts of reasons for it, but one of the byproducts of it is limiting the spectrum of light. Look at the sky now. It doesn't look blue anymore, not that deep, rich blue that it used to be. Now it's kind of a bluey, silvery haze, and it's like this everywhere. It's very, very difficult to find any real blue sky anywhere anymore. And this basically puts a silver light over the earth, which limits our light spectrum again. I mean, all of these things are designed to limit the human experience and to reduce human potential. I mean, talk about reducing human potential. Look what they've done to the family structure in all of our countries. Look what they've done to the family units here in Australia, the legal system, the family court. The destruction of the male via the family court in Australia is actually quite profound. You can do anything you want now, say anything you want against a husband, take any action you want, and the husband will basically be thrown to the wolves in Australia. And there's so many men that are absolutely being destroyed by the legal system in this country due to, unfortunately, the actions of predator women. I mean, sure, there's a lot of bad husbands that do bad things, but there's a lot of bad wives that do bad things as well. The problem is that the Australian family court system makes it attractive for families to break up. It makes it attractive, financially attractive, for a woman to leave her husband, take the kids and take everything that she can from the husband, and to shaft the husband as much as possible. If she isn't prepared to really go for the throat with the husband, then she doesn't get as many benefits from the government. So it's unfortunate that the Australian family legal system has made it a very simple process for a woman who can't find a home anywhere, can't find a place in society, to simply go and find herself a husband, have a child, and then take him to the cleaners and get massive handouts from the government for the rest of her life for doing so. So that, unfortunately, has become a career path for many people, or it would seem that way, looking at Australia anyway, and it really is quite disgraceful. Again, this is all the result of government corruption, all the result of this system which is designed to squash and limit human potential. And look, in saying that, I'm not saying anything against women. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of bad husbands who do bad things. But in Australia, if you look at the way the family system, the family court system is constructed, it's constructed to make this a very viable career choice for a woman who can't find another path in life. And that's an unfortunate reality. And even if the decision isn't made as a career choice, what it does is make it a viable option for any young, struggling family. As soon as the family gets in any type of difficulty at all, which is very, very easy to do given the current economic system and the way the system is designed to ensure that families do end up in difficulty. You know, in times of stress, families need to pull together, but the government makes sure it's a far more attractive option for the woman to simply leave. This, of course, creates a family with a single mother, and there is no father figure for the kids, and then the kids grow up dysfunctional, and then they get on drugs and Ritalin, and it all serves the system all very well. And this is why this system is in place the way it is. You know, and it's a great way of dividing the community. It's a great way of making sure there's people on welfare all the time, making sure that people are dependent upon the nanny state. It's just a great way of controlling things and a great way of distracting people with the rigours of everyday life, which is why they do all this stuff. You know, and they do all of this stuff just to keep us distracted. All these wars, all of this theatre, all this posturing, the worrying about the monetary system, nuclear war, all this stuff, and all the things they do to us on the ground, such as what I just mentioned through the family courts, the drug problems, the drugs that they bring in and spread amongst the populace themselves, the heroin, the cocaine, the crack, everything. All of it is done to limit human potential and to further control human beings. And all of it is being done while this smart grid is being rolled out beneath it all. Again, I've spoken about this so many times, but that's what's happening underneath it all, and that's why we're seeing such a huge escalation in all this stuff at the moment. That's why we're seeing the system going hell for leather to ramp itself up in every direction that it possibly can. We've got so much theatrics happening at the moment. Posturing of wars and currency crashes and every stress they can think of to involve the family, education system, transgenderism, all the stuff that's going on, all of it to distract from what is really going on under the surface, which is this whole smart transhumanist reality that they're bringing online. Of course, this is why they want all the gender transition as well, folks, because once you merge with machine, you won't have a real gender, and so it needs to become acceptable for there to be 34 genders, because otherwise robots won't really have a place in society, and those who are enhanced by machines won't really have a place in society. It will be very difficult to find any type of legal status or socially acceptable place to put them if we don't establish this concept of 34 genders before we bring all this transhumanism online. Then it may not be quite so acceptable. There's always a deeper play, ladies and gentlemen. There's always more to what you see on the surface, and really when you step back and look at all of this stuff, you find that it's all intertwined and it all leads towards the same agenda. That's why I cover so many topics on the show. You know, even when I do one of these thought flows, I tend to go off on down so many rabbit holes and so many tangents, but when you come back you find that they're all tied together anyway, so really you've got to look from all of these perspectives if you want to be able to see the bigger picture. But I think we've reached break time here, ladies and gentlemen, so I'll leave it there for now and we'll go and have a break. Thank you for joining me on the air today. It's always a pleasure to have your company, and I'll speak to you again in a few minutes. Don't go away.